This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla in the 3D Security and Training Academy studios.
We feel the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He gave voice to a dream that would challenge us to honor the sacred charters of our liberty, that all men are created equal.
On this very special episode of the Palin Update, we honor the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're joined today by Reverend King's niece, Alveda King, to discuss her amazing uncle and look at race relations in 2015. Amazing America with Sarah Palin, Season 2 kicks off on Sportsman Channel. A brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson is coming up from Virginia. And just ahead, our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman of Missouri. Welcome to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. The Palin Update is sponsored by 3D Security and Training Academy. Learn more at 3dsta.com. Right now, we say hello to Dr. Alveda King, author of King Rules and director of African American Outreach with Priests for Life. Dr. Alveda King, welcome back to the Palin Update. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you? And hello to you and all of your listening audience.
Doing well. Thanks for asking. Thanks for being here again. And here we go again, embarking on a very special day we celebrate every year, and also really the whole week, I think. Martin Luther King Jr. Day this week, and, you know, who better to talk to than the niece of the great man himself. And, you know, I've talked to you about this before in the past, and maybe you'll say the same stuff, maybe not, but I really want to throw this out there again because, you know, a lot of people talk about all the wonderful things he did and how he stood up to people when he had to, and that is, of course, you know, the reason we recognize him. But you know, I really just like to hear you talk about him as your uncle. I'd like to know, what do you think about when you think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when you think about him just as your uncle, not so much as this leader, but as your uncle? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was Uncle ML, and I talk about him in my book, King Rules, and you'll hear me say Uncle ML and Daddy. And my dad was A.D. King. So they were brothers, and they kind of grew up together, of course. So when they got married, they always said, Daddy said, he would say when they were little, when we grow up, we'll marry women who look alike so our children look alike. And interestingly enough, their wives were the same height, had the same body type, same hair, all of that. And I have one picture of my mother and Uncle Emil's wife, Uncle Alveda, and they really looked like sisters in that picture. So that was how close they were. And I often went to church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, when Uncle Emil was preaching there. So I actually had opportunities to sit in a congregation where he was preaching, and those are things I remember.
Now, when you were a young girl and you were around him, did you realize all that was really going on and the magnitude of what he was doing? And then as you got older, how did your appreciation for his courage and the things he did change?
No one knew or understood the magnitude of what we were doing during those years. You have to remember, in 1963, I went on my own civil rights march, and it was the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama, after the 16th Street Church was bombed, 16th Street Baptist Church. I went to school with one of the little girls, I think the McNair girl. Also, our own home, A.D. and Naomi King's Church Parsonage, had been bombed in May, the night before Mother's Day. And Mom writes about that in her book, A.D. and M.L. King, Two Brothers Who Dared to Dream. And I also did as well write about it, too. So I was part of that movement, and I knew my uncle, my dad, my grandfather, all were involved in that movement. You don't necessarily think about the magnitude of something when you're doing it, and that was the case.
You know, one of the great things that comes from Martin Luther King Day nowadays is this day of service. A lot of people get out there and, you know, they have the day off from work, they have the day off from school, and instead of going shopping or doing whatever that we see on so many holidays, unfortunately, people are going out and helping. They're getting into communities, you know, simple things, raking leaves, painting, reading to kids. That's a great legacy, isn't it, that your uncle left behind?
Well, yes, and the theme of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center, which was founded by Uncle Emil's wife, Uncle Alveda, a day on and not a day off, is their theme that's ongoing. I think my cousin, when he was president, Dexter Scott King, came up with that theme, and then now Bernice King, who is the CEO now of the King Center, hers is 365 days of nonviolence. And she said, make a moratorium on any type of violence especially on the holiday and on my uncle's birthday. No violent thoughts, no violent words. Even just an unkind word towards someone is a violent thing, you know. So practicing nonviolence and serving others. Uncle Emil loved the scripture Jesus had. In order to be great in God's kingdom, you have to be a servant of all. And Uncle Emil would say, everyone can be great because everyone can serve.
You know, you talk about violence and anti-violence that your uncle was so big on and known for. A huge year in a negative way as far as race relations in this country. And, of course, a lot of people go back and quote your uncle a lot of times when they talk about race relations and things that are going on. What have you thought? I mean, it's a lot to talk about, but, I mean, just in general, whether it be the situation in Ferguson, the situation in New York City, and the reactions we've seen people protesting and then taking it further with looting and violence. What do you think about that? A lot of people have said, hey, this goes against everything that Dr. King stood for.
Well, actually, I believe my uncle would just encourage people to embrace the principle of nonviolent conflict resolution, which he actually did adopt from Gandhi. But it was also the power of Jesus Christ that really fueled my uncle, my daddy, my grandfather. You know, they were Baptist preachers, and the civil rights movement was just framed in prayer. Many of their meetings during those days were in churches. So he would encourage us to certainly be nonviolent and to depend on prayer and faith in this troubled time.
You've been out speaking. You do a great job at that. People really are drawn to you. They like to hear what you have to say. And I know you spoke at Creighton University recently. What was the gist of that speech?
That was powerful, and I had the same type of message there that what I'm sharing today. It's always the same with me now. Of course, people are very interested in my position on the defense of life from conception until natural death as well, and to give people positive alternatives, nonviolent alternatives to abortion, because abortion is very violent. So it's all of those types of messages that I bring forth, just living a life of God's love and nonviolence.
You know, Martin Luther King used action and took action when he was talking about race, but it seems that you're doing that with the pro-life issue. And is that something you're calling on others to do, to defend life, and not by just saying it or saying, hey, look, I'm pro-life, but going out there and taking action?
Well, we'd have to recognize that civil rights actually begins in the womb, because a person is a person from actually conception or fertilization, or, right from the very moment the chromosomes come together, that makes a person. And so if we really want to have civil rights, we have to consider every human being. And that's a kind of a universal message. It's not only limited to skin color, but just a human being is a human being. My father, Reverend A.D. King, loves Acts 17:26, of one blood God made all people to dwell on the face of the earth. So since we are all people, we need to love each other regardless of our differences. What brings us together is the fact that we were created to be a human family.
I know some people try to give a different angle to this, but you've been pretty steadfast in saying that, Dr. King was absolutely pro-life, as you remember him.
Well, I remember my whole family, through our bloodlines for several generations. Daddy King, that's my grandfather. My mom was pregnant with me in 1950, and it was inconvenient at the time because she wanted to finish college. And my granddaddy told her, he said, she's not a lump of flesh. I saw her in a dream 3 years ago. She has bright skin and bright red hair, and she's going to bless many people. My mother listened to my granddad, and not only was I born, Mom and Dad, during their marriage, 5 of us were birthed. And I'm poster board. If I had secret abortions, I bought into the feminist message of a woman having a right to choose what she does with her body during the 60s. And that's actually true, 60s and 70s. But, a woman does have a right to choose what she does with her body. The baby's not her body. And so I came through that time period. And my grandfather, there again, Daddy King, in the mid-70s, I was pregnant. And I did tell him I was planning to have another abortion. And he said, they're lying to you. That's not a lump of flesh. That's my great-grandchild. And because of Granddaddy and prayer and all of that, the goodness of God, I was able to birth 6 living children. I did have 2 abortions and a miscarriage. So I really tell people I'm the mother of 9. I used to say I was a mother of 6, and then I would say 7. You know, I added each abortion and the miscarriage one by one. And so today I recognize Philip, Jessica, and Raphael will meet me in heaven. I'm looking forward to that many years from now.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, Governor Palin, Sarah Palin, has quoted Martin Luther King many times. You know, Palin's known, obviously, for calling out people on both sides of the aisle, no matter what their political stance are, if they're not doing their job. But, you know, along with Ronald Reagan, I'd say Martin Luther King is one of those that she's really looked up to and has really, you know, put out there many times quotes and just have, you know, encouraged people to follow his word and things that he has said. So what does that do for you as, you know, as a family member to see all these years later that even when we're going through turmoil, that you have somebody like Governor Palin and, you know, big people out there who are still spreading the word of Dr. King, and not just in January, but all year long?
Well, I believe that people were inspired or angered from Martin Luther King Jr., and I know that Governor Palin has been inspired by him. So people quote him for various reasons, of course, and I think that it's just fine. I you know, having known my uncle and loved my uncle, he wanted to inspire people, to help people, and I believe that was his goal. So he's there for everyone to know and know about. And I'll make a quick reference to the movie Selma, because several people told me, well, I saw Selma, or should I see Selma? And I saw Selma, and I think it had some tremendous entertainment value and historical interest. It wasn't a documentary. It's not a documentary. But it should put people on a path of maybe exploring and finding out more. For instance, my dad was in Selma. He was on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He experienced being beat up and all of that, and they never mentioned Martin Luther King Jr.'s brother in the movie, but there again, it wasn't a documentary. So I saw the movie, and I recommended it. I think it's unfortunate we're having another squabble about the Oscar panels being racist and all of that, but having said all of that, I think historically it's important that people know about Martin Luther King. I'm glad he's still relevant today.
Well, Dr. Alveda King, you are certainly relevant. Wonderful to speak to, as always. She is the author of King Rules. You got to check it out if you haven't yet. And the director of African American Outreach with Priests for Life, Dr. Alveda King, the niece of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Big week this week and his special day, Martin Luther King Day. And Dr. King, thank you so much. God bless you for all you do. And we're going to talk to you again, I hope, down the road.
God bless you and your audience. Bye-bye.
For more on Dr. King, visit AfricanAmericanOutreach.org.